Welcome to the Education Marketing Leader podcast with Chris Raposo. If you're looking to dive into the latest industry insights, draw inspiration from education success stories, or just want to sharpen your marketing skills, you're in the right place. Here, we bring you a diverse range of voices from experts and leaders in the field, offering you a unique blend of professional development and practical strategies. Whether you want to understand your audience better, stay updated with the latest tech trends in marketing, or expand your professional network, we've got you covered. So while you're driving on your morning commute or winding down after a busy day, let's explore the dynamic world of education marketing together.
How important is mobile optimization in the design of a higher ed website, and what are some of the key considerations in that area?
One of the things that I learned a few years ago, actually from someone at Facebook, is thumb optimization. And so looking at where the tap targets are for someone that holds a phone in one hand, because most of us hold a phone in one hand. So taking into account where people are going to be tapping, making sure that when you design maybe a page that's got a request for information form, RFI form on it, that the field is right where your thumb's going to be, or that the submit button is right where your thumb is going to be, or making sure that if you're going to put something like a chatbot on your website, that it isn't covering up stuff where your thumb is at that needs to be hit. I encounter this all the time. We all have to do cookie preference stuff now, and then everyone has a chatbot now, and the chatbot covers up the little close or accept button on the cookie guy, or it covers up a critical call to action to apply or request information. And so you can't click it, and it's just frustrating and annoying. The main thing with UX, from whether it's mobile or desktop, it's reducing friction. Just get out of people's way.
Hello and welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Education Marketing Leader with Chris Raposo. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Joel Goodman, the Principal and CEO at Bravery Media. Joel, thanks for being on the show and welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Hey, Joel, I've been following you on LinkedIn for a little bit, and I found out that you are a result-focused higher ed digital strategist, marketer, designer, and developer with nearly 2 decades of industry experience. And in 2012, you started Bravery Media with a goal of propelling institutions of higher education towards their full potential. Can you give us a little bit of a background about your journey, why you chose to serve the higher ed sector, and a bit more about Bravery Media?
Yeah, so right out of undergrad, typical story for folks my age, coming out into a recession, hard to find other jobs. My undergrad background was in media promotions, and so I wanted to get into marketing. Originally, I wanted to get into marketing for record labels, and then I had a little taste of the music industry and decided it wasn't for me, and got a job at my undergrad alma mater. And so I worked on campuses for about 6 years at 2 different institutions. Following that last year in the North Chicago suburbs, I had just finished up a master's degree. My wife and I kind of looked at what was going on in our lives and said, we need to get out of here. Where do we go? And so we packed up in 2012, like about summertime of 2012, and we moved to Austin, Texas, and I started Bravery. And then, I just used kind of the network that I had built up those 6 years through conferences and, Twitter. It was like the birth of Twitter, the real high point of Twitter before all the brands took over. Ended up starting up my agency, doing web work. I'd always been just the web guy, army of one sort of thing. And these days I get to work with the team, which is awesome. And I get to work on a lot of different projects, which is awesome, and with a lot of different institutions. And hopefully, just really help them reach that potential. That was the thing with me getting into higher ed. I just always had this feeling while working on campuses, but even as a student and being involved in different things, that our institutions have so much potential, but the focus ends up kind of going in all kinds of different places because of just the strange mix of business and non-business and academic, and all the different personalities and kind of backgrounds that everyone has. And so hopefully we help bring a little bit of focus, at least to that web area, and help reach that potential that our institutions have.
Yeah, yeah. Talking about web, after following you for a while, I know you have a passion to make sure that higher websites are user friendly so that the potential students or the prospective students will find what they're looking for in order to possibly enroll in an institution. And those probably is some of the work that you do with your clients that are higher ed institutions. So there's always, every student has unique needs and different behaviors, but how do the unique needs and behaviors of today's prospective students shape the strategies for designing a user-friendly higher ed websites? What's your insight there?
Yeah, we at Bravery take an approach of data first. I think there's, you look at like industry best practice, and sure, it's kind of a good rule of thumb. A lot of times, though, agencies or higher ed institutions that feel like they can't afford to work with an outside partner, they kind of stop there, right? It's like, well, we've got the best practice in place. This is the best thing, right? The best practice is the best. But to your point, users are different. Every institution is different. Every institution has a different story to tell. Every institution has different goals. And so we always go back to wanting to learn about the users that are going to be hitting someone's website. So we always start with a data approach. We do user research. We talk to people. We analyze all the data of how people are already using the website. We look at other data across the industry and how other websites are being used. And then we look a little bit outside of higher ed, because the same students that are hitting a college or university website are interacting with hundreds or thousands of other web experiences every single day, and more like they interact with those more than they interact with our websites. And so some level of assumption gets into the mind of these prospective students and these website users, because they're learning these patterns, they're becoming trained in how different things are supposed to react. Higher ed's a little slow to jump on that. I mean, higher ed's a little slow to jump on a lot of things, but in particular when it comes to user experience design, we'll design a website and we'll let it sit for 5, 6, 7 years. And a lot of times institutions are, they're understaffed. Most institutions are, people that work in web and marketing especially are stretched very thin. They may not be paid what they should be paid to do the work that they need to do. They may not be given the professional development opportunities to level up their skills. And so the website just kind of sits and languishes, using maybe these user experience practices that honestly were probably outdated by the time the website launched, because a website redesign process takes at least a year in higher ed. And so, how do we go about fixing those things? And a lot of that, as I was saying, comes with starting with data, but then it also is putting in place methods to continue measuring while the website's operating, and then building sustainable practices for going back and changing things and feeling like you have the franchise and the license to update an experience, or do some A/B testing on an RFI form, or change out a photo and see if that works better than the super heavy drone video that you had on the homepage. And then at the end, go back and test it again, right? So you start with testing, you test in the middle, and then you test at the end, and you make sure that you recognize the website is just a growing, changeable thing, because the expectations of our users are constantly changing with the rest of the digital world around them.
Yeah, let's say somebody takes on your recommendations, they move that drone video away and they put that image on there. I know that you posted something about the difference between a PNG and a JPEG. Which format should be that image?
Between those two, a JPEG, and there are also, there are a lot of modern image formats, and I always recommend that institutions put an edge image optimization service or CDN in front of their website, because it'll automate changing that format to the best and smallest and fastest possible loading one that a device can handle. So the newer formats that are coming out, WebP is one that was backed by Google and is now, every modern browser supports it. AVIF is another one. It's AVIF. There are new ones that are still kind of on the cusp and being integrated into modern formats. I think ones like JPEG XL. So the formats change, and I think it goes, the issue that comes out of this is that so many institutions don't have the staffing to keep up with that, or don't allow their staff the time to keep up with those changes. And then a lot of times, yeah, I mean, to your point and the point of my post, like, a lot of institutions don't give their content publishers the right training to know the difference between a PNG file and a JPEG file, or a WebP file, or and all those different things. PNG files are always going to be larger, and the larger the photo file size wise, the slower your website's going to load, and the slower your website loads, the worse your conversion rates are going to be, and the worse your conversion rates are going to be, the fewer applicants you're going to have to your institution. And so it just comes with optimizing all the way down the chain.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just briefly touched on the low staff, and everybody's overwhelmed. There's a lot of work to do. But in your experience, what are the top 3 elements that every higher ed website must have to ensure a great user experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first and to be honest, probably easiest is site speed. All the tools are out there. You need your website to be fast. I think when we were talking earlier, prepping for the show, I mentioned this study that Google did when they released their Core Web Vitals kind of set that goes into the Lighthouse speed test. And what they found was that for every website that takes 3 seconds to load, your conversion rate is cut in half. Like 50% of those people drop off. And that's huge, especially in an industry where we need every single person that is likely to apply to actually apply. When you're throwing up a roadblock like that, when someone, maybe it's someone that lives in a rural area and only has access to the internet on their phone, and they still are sitting on 3G networks out in the country someplace, or they're on really congested mobile networks in an urban setting. If your website doesn't load for them on mobile, you lost them. They're going to go somewhere else. They're going to go to an institution's website that loads fast, and they're going to feel like they're actually taken care of, and that institution cares about them. Having pretty photos and videos is not something that makes your website better. Like it can support it, but if you don't have the site speed in place, then that doesn't matter. So number 1, site speed. Number 2, I think having the proper journeys in place on your website, like actually leading people to take an action. So many times we look at higher ed websites and it's a vanity exercise. It's all about our ego as an institution. We want to show how cool we are, when in reality, the people that are coming to your website only want to take care of the task that's in their mind. They are coming to say, or they're coming to ask you, do you have my program? How much does it cost? And now how can I get more information about it? And if you muddy that up with 10 news stories on your homepage that no one cares about, a prospective high school student does not care about the assistant in the registrar's office that won a local award in your small town at your private college. Like they just don't care. And like, it's great, like, write those stories and brag about those people, but don't put it in the way of a student finding their way to the information that they're looking for. So mapping those journeys on your website and making sure that every piece of content is there for a reason, I think, is the number 2 most important thing that institutions need to take a look at with this. Third, I think it's really just making sure that the whatever is powering the website, whether it's a content management system, whether it's internal processes, make sure that tech is helping your staff get their jobs done and not getting in the way of getting their jobs done. The workflows need to be there to allow them to be productive and efficient in what they're doing, because if they're productive and efficient, your website's only going to improve, because they can spend less time fighting with the software and more time actually making the website something that's good and workable for people.
Let's talk about a little bit about the content strategy that we just briefly touched on.
Yeah.
How do you balance informative content with engaging visuals to keep prospective students interested and move them through the enrollment funnel?
Yeah, I honestly am not convinced that visuals are the things that engage students. So I think we place too much emphasis on having really cool graphics or having lots of videos on a page. If you have 5 videos and let's say they're all linked from like YouTube or something, YouTube's loading the same JavaScript like 5 times on that website and making it slower. And then you're giving these prospects a jumping off point from your website to get lost on YouTube, which is, a huge search engine now. Like it's not social media anymore. It's its own thing. And they'll get lost and they'll end up, watching, I don't know, if they're like me, they're going to end up watching, like cooking videos and stuff on, learning the banjo or something. And yeah, and then you've lost them. They're not in that context of your institution anymore. And graphics can be heavy. And so like the more images that you put on a page, the harder it's going to be. And a lot of times, we want fun animations and parallax and all this motion and graphics and stuff. Well, that can get in the way of accessibility if you don't put that, if you don't put reduced motion settings in place in your CSS, that can get you in trouble. But also like a lot of times it just weighs it down if you're not working with someone that's doing that in an efficient way. So I think first it comes down to structuring your written content and making sure that is in an easy to parse kind of format. So it could be numbered lists or bulleted lists. It could be, all the old writing for the web UX principles that have been around for decades. They still apply. Like chunk your stuff together. Don't give them a wall of paragraphs that makes it feel like you have to read a novel. Make sure that your website is as clear as possible. Like I kind of facetiously talk about this internally. Like just assume that the people coming to your website don't know anything, and you just need to be clear and get to the point of all that content, because honestly they don't know anything. Most of them have no idea who you are. They don't know what you offer, or they have a light knowledge of it and they still just want to get to the point. None of us have time to sit and read flowery stories about every single point. We want to say like, okay, cool, how do I apply 1 2 3 4 5? Just go through the exact process and say, this is the thing, this is the thing. Don't use the flowery language from, the whoever wrote it from the, the registrar's office. Make sure that you have marketers writing that stuff. If your content is clear and laid out in a way that people can understand it and take action, then the visuals are just kind of icing on the cake. They don't need, most people don't need to stay engaged on your website because they are there to do something. As long as the content is answering their questions, they're going to be engaged. And it's not really worth, in my opinion anyway, going after people that aren't interested in you, that happen to land on your website with pretty pictures and videos, because I just don't think they make a difference. There's no data supporting that.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially what you just said with the flowery language. It makes me think of when I'm trying to find a recipe for a dish I want to make, and the first 5 paragraphs are like opening paragraphs. I'm just like, I want to just know which ingredients they need to use and
right?
How to,
100%. No, I mean, that's a great analogy, especially like, as we're recording this, like I'm prepping for making Thanksgiving dinner this week. And I'm like, cool, I gotta, what do I gotta get together? It's the same thing. You look up a recipe and then it's great, cool. I gotta read through a whole story that's not even talking about the process. It's talking about, someone's grandma's something or other. And yeah, it gets in the way of actually the thing that I want from that page. And sure, it might be, well, for them anyway, better than for SEO. Actually, not better for SEO, because Google looks at that UX experience. And if you're giving visitors what they want, and if they're getting off the page real fast because they can't find it, or they're getting lost, like that's affecting your search engine rankings.
Yeah. And you touched on earlier, you didn't say digital natives, but let's assume we got Gen Zers coming to your website. They don't just surf the internet anymore. They basically live on the internet, and they are used to modern interfaces, user experience. And then when you go to a higher ed website that may be 10 years behind, that creates that sort of friction. Now, I want to touch a little bit on personalization.
Yeah.
Not the creepy type that's like it follows you to all the other sites, but more about the personalization that enhances the user experience on a higher ed websites without infringing on user privacy. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that the effective ways to go about personalization when you don't have a lot of data about, when they haven't like signed up for something already, when they're not in your CRM, is really just trying to make sure that the kind of supplemental content that you put into your website is matching what their interests are. So if you find someone that hits your site and, you notice that they're looking at engineering programs, might make sense to, highlight some content related to engineering. So maybe it's a news story, maybe they're already past that, like, do you have my program kind of point of view. So now you can say, oh, well, they're going and looking at financial aid and tuition. Well, okay, if you have special requirements for that application or for that, that financial aid, maybe it's scholarships and grants or whatever for people that are going to be engineering majors, raise that content to the surface, like show them that in the process of what they're doing. And then when they go back to the homepage, like whatever news stories you have or whatever student stories you're highlighting, make sure they're related in some way, maybe not entirely on the nose, but maybe a little bit on the nose, related to that that idea of wanting to go in engineering and the things that you can do. And don't show them stuff from your medical your medical programs or the art programs or whatever else, or at least not as much. And so I think personally, I think a light touch is the thing that makes your experience a little bit more hospitable. It allows people to feel like they're cared for, and also puts a little bit of surprise into it. You don't want to surprise them outright, like you were saying, like creepy, like, yeah, insert their name somewhere page, like, hey, I didn't give you my name, what's going on? But if you can make the experience feel more natural, that's a way to care for your users on the website. I think a lot of times in higher ed, personalization isn't explained well enough. And so it became a buzzword at one point. So everyone was just like, we got to do personalization. And then they're thinking like email personalization, where you're putting merge tags into stuff. It's different spectrums, right? It's different spectrums than that. No one shops for a program like they shop for a new hairbrush on Amazon. So find ways to make personalization something that fits in the context of that experience, not trying to force in something from another. You're not e-commerce, right? Don't force in the e-commerce stuff into higher ed.
Let's pivot back to mobile optimization. I like the example you gave earlier of somebody living in a rural area and who may only have access to a university's website on their mobile phone. And there's an increase of mobile devices, people looking at websites on a mobile device, whether they're on a commute, on a train, or wherever. How important is mobile optimization in the design of a higher ed website? And what are some of the key considerations in that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. Across higher ed, we've been redesigning and auditing and doing consulting on higher ed websites for 11 years as of this recording, more than 11 years as of this recording. And what we've seen over that decade plus is an increase in mobile usage. So pretty much any institution that, I mean, there are some outliers, but across higher ed, you're at a minimum 50% of your users, are accessing your website from a mobile device. It's a non-negotiable. You can't have a website that has a terrible mobile experience and is really good on desktop, because you can't guarantee that those people are going to be on your desktop website until they're actually students. And I mean, maybe they will, but they can, but you can't guarantee that they will. So if your mobile site, or if the mobile version of your site is not fully featured, is not fully usable from touch devices, again, that's a whole nother bucket of conversion that you're just losing, right? So some of the things to keep in mind, what we always work on when we have a audit, or like a research project that we put together called the Website Strategy Guide, and we do a deep dive audit into a university or college's website, and we go through and just basically give our clients a playbook for every single thing that they can do to improve their website. Site speed, down to like what JavaScript to get rid of, what CSS to refactor. And then we do a dive into their analytics. We look at some of the UX things. And so one of the things that I learned a few years ago, actually from someone at Facebook, is thumb optimization. And so looking at where the tap targets are for someone that holds a phone in one hand, because most of us hold a phone in one hand. And if we're going to make people switch hands or use two hands to hit a touch target someplace, they'll probably just leave. Like, you want to make that convenient. But a lot of times we still follow these patterns of having a menu button in the top right corner, where, like, if you're left-handed, maybe you can stretch up to that top corner, but if you're right-handed, it's really difficult, right? So taking into account where people are going to be tapping, making sure that when you design maybe a page that's got a request for information form, RFI form on it, that the field is right where your thumb's going to be, or that the submit button is right where your thumb is going to be, or making sure that if you're going to put something like a chatbot on your website, that it isn't covering up stuff where your thumb is at that needs to be hit. I encounter this all the time. We all have to do cookie preference stuff now, and then everyone has a chatbot now, and the chatbot covers up the little close or accept button on the cookie guy, or it covers up a critical call to action to apply or request information. And so you can't click it. And it's just frustrating and annoying. The main thing with UX, from whether it's mobile or desktop, it's reducing friction. Just get out of people's way. But we so often don't look at that from our actual devices, right? We'll work with an agency, or we'll do it in-house, and we'll do a mobile version of the site, and we're doing full mobile responsive all the way up to desktop, but then we don't load it on our phone and actually see how it is to interact with those different devices. That's the main thing. It's making sure that there's no friction there. I think the second part of this, so we touched on it way earlier, so I won't go in depth, is that site speed thing again, because phones they're smaller. They don't need to have these giant images or giant videos loaded onto them. And a lot of times we're not optimizing the sizes of images they're going to load at different breakpoints. And that technology exists and has existed for a decade. So we should be doing that anyway, loading a small size image for a small phone, because it's going to be a lot faster.
Yeah, that was such an amazing insight, what you just talked about with the making sure it's thumb accessible
Yeah.
on your phone. I didn't even think about that, to be honest with you. So that's really good insight right there. And I recently had a webinar with another agency, and they told us about some of the pitfalls of the universities they partnered with. At some of the pages, they didn't have a call to action, which was incredibly foreign to me. Like, how do you not have a call to action?
Right.
What are some innovative calls to action strategies that have proven effective in guiding prospective students down towards enrollment?
Yeah, I think a lot of times there's a misconception that a call to action has to be like a button looking link. And those are effective. More often than not, institutions rely on the apply now or request info button in the top right corner of their navigation, and that's every single higher ed institution has that pattern on their site, and that's okay. Like, consistency is a UX principle that needs to exist. However, people ignore those. If most institutions go and look at like heat maps of who's clicking on those things, those are the calls to action that don't get a lot of play. What we have found that's really useful is to prompt people in context with your content. So if your content's written well, you are leading people to take an action. And so it could be as simple as, hey, are you ready to learn more about that? Get in touch with an admissions counselor, and that get in touch with an admissions counselor is the call to action. It doesn't have to be apply now or request info. Those are the only two that we use right now, apply or request info. Sometimes they're like, request info about what? And because there's no context around it. So if you think in terms of like writing your calls to action as though they are actual content, they could just be linked within a paragraph. They could be called out at some point. I think that's kind of the approach that higher ed needs to take on. I think a lot of times, this is probably similar to what that other agency was experiencing, but a lot of times we'll have news stories, or especially like student spotlight stories, and like those stories are great, but they rarely lead back to anything actionable. They're rarely linked to the program that student was in. There's rarely a call to action to get someone to want to apply. And the whole purpose of that content is to add color and structure and shape to the program that you want them to attend. And if you're not telling that story and then leading them into an action, whether that is requesting info or applying or even just going to that program page and learning more about the program, that's just wasted time and effort and money. And the amount of effort that goes into creating those student stories it's a lot. There's a lot that goes into those and doing them really well, only to waste that effort by not linking through to something else that's related to it, a program or an apply now. It frustrates me so much, and we see it all the time. And the same thing with news stories. A lot of times your news stories are tangentially related to something your website's doing, linked over to the thing. Like, get people, all of your content should lead to an action. And whether that action is an actual conversion metric or whether that action is going to learn more about a specific thing or getting them into into the financial aid process and finding out about tuition, it needs to lead somewhere, and we just kind of forget about it when we just like, we did the content and the content is enough, but it's not. There is no if you write it they will come, or if you post it they will come. Like, it's just not how it works anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got to give a shout out to my alma mater, the University of Florida Online. They did a spotlight on me, and then at the bottom of it, throughout the whole spotlight, he kind of talked about the public relations program, hinted
Nice.
on it, and then at the bottom of it, they were like, hey, if you want to, have a career in public relations and become like Chris Raposa, who's now works at a tech company in Atlanta, check out our program page for public relations,
It's amazing.
Yeah, that sort of thing. It's not hard. It's very easy. You just got to put it in there. You tell people where they go, what's the next step, in order to just let them enjoy the story and then forget about it in 2 hours.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So you've been your agency owner since about 11 years now, almost 12 years, and you've seen a lot, I'm sure, over the course of your career there. So what are some common pitfalls in designing higher ed websites, and how can they be avoided?
I think the biggest one is, I think a lot of what we've been talking about are kind of the biggest pitfalls, but I think, this kind of like shiny object syndrome that we still have in higher ed, that we've had my entire career. Something new comes out, whether it's, now it's AI, it was chatbots before, there's always something new. But there isn't it's okay to implement those things, but a lot of times we don't go back and look at the foundation of what's there and make sure that the foundation is solid. So like with AI, I was actually just writing a blog post about this, but like with AI, they're just large language models. They're trained on content. Chatbots the same way, and we're going to get more of this large language model stuff coming into normal chatbots, but they're trained on your content. So if your content is bad, if your UX is bad, maybe they'll be a little bit better than your UX and your content, but you're still not fixing the problem. And you're actually like paying a lot of money for these tools that are just not going to be working optimally. Right. So I think the pitfall is that we want to implement the next new shiny tool without understanding if our users actually care about that thing, and without actually fixing the underlying problems that are going to affect those tools and how they perform in the first place. I think the second biggest pitfall is we are a lot of times more concerned with the nice, fun looking thing. Like we want back in the day, it used to be like, it needs to be dynamic. And like, for those of us that code, we're like, well, dynamic is, we know what that means. I don't think you mean that. They meant like, we want something that moves on the page, and like, okay, fine. Like, but it's not data centric, right? We're not looking at what our users actually want out of a website. We're assuming that what we, as a lot of times we're 10, 20, 30 years older than the prospective students we're going after. And we assume that what we think is cool is the same thing as what they think is cool. And UX practice is global. Like, good UX is good UX, and then you start to change and mold it to your specific audience. And so a lot of those things, like, I mean, sliders have been discounted for years, like carousels on a homepage, like, in like a hero or whatever. Like, no one looks at those. No one's coming to look at a slideshow of your stuff. They're coming to figure out, do you have the thing I want, right? As we were talking about earlier. So I think that's a big part of it. And then there's just systemic issues in this industry where leadership, even not leadership, everyone thinks they're a web designer. And so everyone thinks that they need to have a voice into what the web design is going to be and what the content's going to be on the website. But the reality of it still is that the marketers in this industry are the ones that know what should be on that site, because they're the ones that are responsible for filling those classrooms and filling those enrollment funnels and and all of that. And they're not given the license and the franchise and the support from leadership to say no. Like they aren't able to do that. So we go through this a lot as a web design agency. We're working on a homepage design for an institution, and we will optimize. We're like, this is for you to increase your enrollment, and then they've got to send it out to a committee of 15 people. Or like, oh, we need everyone to have buy-in and all of our stakeholders and everything. And then they get all this feedback about, well, this is missing, and why don't we have this? Like, well, very specific reasons, but those people were not in the strategy process sitting down with us and listening to what we had to say. And that's it's so frustrating, because then you end up putting out a website or a homepage that is not as performant as it could be. It's not converting as many people as it could, because things are getting put in the way, messing up that model. And they're all things that aren't data centric. And so like, you can't test like the baseline and then test those things out. It's just like, well, these are here. So I think there's a real need for the marketers in higher ed to be given the license to own that website and to own all the content on that website. And it's just not there yet. And it only costs the institution money. It only costs them students. And the sooner that leadership understands that and actually works toward giving the marketing folks on their campuses that power and that that franchise to do what needs to be done, the sooner they can turn around their flagging enrollment numbers, or the sooner they can explode the enrollment numbers that they're already working toward.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great insight. The whole episode was really rich. Thanks for that. And say we have a higher ed marketer on the audience here listening, and they're overwhelmed, they're short-staffed, but they know they got to do something to improve that user experience. What is the first practical step they should take to improve user experience on their website?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really goes back to site speed. That's the number one thing. Like, make sure your website is really, really fast. There are a lot of tools and resources out there. There's Google page speed. I think it's like pagespeed.web.dev now. There's it's built on a product called Lighthouse. There are all kinds of tools. Just jump on Google and look for a site speed checker, or call Bravery. Like, we're happy to do an audit, and we do that work all the time, because it's critical. like let that 100% of people come in that could possibly convert, and then we'll work on the rest of the stuff that that knocks them out. But like, pull that barrier down. And then I think beyond that, it really just comes down to testing. It's talking to your users. It's looking at the analytics that you have, making sure you have the right data tracking in place, and even that you have your analytics set up so you can actually get data out of it. I think that's a big problem in higher ed too. It's that we have all this data, but do we know how to understand it and parse it? Do we have those things set up properly? Again, Bravery is happy to help set those things up and look at that and audit those systems. But I think knowing what's happening with your website is the first step to being able to know what to do with it. And site speed is a problem across the industry. So it's just my number one.
Awesome. Yeah, totally. So how can people get in touch with you if they want to partner with you?
Yeah, bravery.co is our website. I'm on LinkedIn, Joel Goodman. It'll say that I am the CEO of Bravery, so you can come and add me on LinkedIn. We're about to launch a tool in the next couple of weeks here called SpeedyU, where we're basically doing leaderboards across higher ed websites to see who has the fastest ones, which will be fun and eye-opening probably across the industry. But yeah, the folks will start seeing that across the website and across the internet. And then we also have a short form podcast called Appendix B at bravery.co/podcast. or wherever people get their podcasts, where we talk about some big issue for about 10 minutes every week, and just tackle some of these marketing issues in higher ed.
Very good, Joel. Thank you so much for today. Thank you so much for your time. I learned a lot, and I know the audience learned a lot as well. So thank you very much, Joel.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to be here.